So if you've ever been programming with Pocketbase for a little while, you may have encountered some limitations that Pocketbase has. Maybe the CRUD operations just aren't doing it for you. You need to start doing some more batch operations. Maybe you're wanting to break into AI and you're not wanting to do it through some intermediary server like Next.js backend or something like that. This is where Pocketbase starts to lose its grip, and we have to look at other ways of extending Pocketbase in order to perform these additional functionalities. Now, Pocketbase extensions are exactly what this was built for. Pocketbase has two ways of extending. It's got using Go or using JavaScript. Now, I'm going to break down why each of these methods is good, why they're bad, and then we're going to build a few examples of great extensions that are going to help you in your process of building and your process of ideation and planning when it comes to building out SaaS apps in Pocketbase. So to start with, like always, you're wanting to go to the Pocketbase documentation. And if you haven't already, download Pocketbase. We'll jump into exactly what we're going to do, download it for your distribution. But for starters, let's just look at the extension methods that we have. So we've got extend with Go and extend with JavaScript. I am more interested in programming with JavaScript than I am with Go for doing web development stuff like we would be doing with a SaaS. So for this purpose of this video, we're going to focus mainly on JavaScript, but I will show you how to do the extensions with Go. But the ways that, or the examples that we have in the documents show us a lot. So we've got event hooks, which allow us to hook into the SQL life cycle. So as records are created, deleted, updated, etc., we can hook into those and then perform actions based on those sorts of things. So for instance, if a user record's updated and then some auxiliary table needs to be updated as a result of the user being updated, this is a perfect example of where you would use an extension. If you wanted to add routing on, so for instance, if you wanted to provide web pages or any sort of middleware, this is where routing comes in handy. You can update settings, etc., etc. Basically, if you've ever used any backend before, all of this is going to be very familiar to you. You can add your own REST routes, database operations, where we would want to do direct SQL stuff that we can't do as part of the normal SDK. Record operations, this is how we can actually fetch data from records that are pulled through in Pocketbase. Collection operations, how we can gather collections directly within our extensions. We've got our migrations, which is to basically look at how we can extend the Pocketbase SQL schema. Jobs scheduling, we can use cron jobs, so add additional cron jobs. One of the things that is great about the new Pocketbase is you can execute these cron jobs that you've added custom directly on the admin GUI. I'll get into that a little bit later. You can create stuff for sending emails. For example, I've got a newsletter that I send out from Pocketbase using a custom hook that I created for a newsletter. You're able to render templates, so it allows for HTML templating and pulling all these things together. If you're wanting to use Pocketbase to serve your front end, you've also got some console commands that can be run through directly through the Pocketbase instance. You've got the ability to send HTTP requests directly from Pocketbase. Now, this is very important for extending with JavaScript because I think this is where a lot of people get unstuck when they first start. Is Pocketbase JavaScript is very different from normal JavaScript. What do I mean by normal JavaScript? I mean JavaScript that would execute in the browser or in Node.js. It's not going to behave the exact same way in Pocketbase. And I'll explain the reason for this. Pocketbase uses a engine in Go to run JavaScript, and that engine is called Goja. And Goja is not like for like with Node.js. So Node.js is both a runtime and an engine for you to execute JavaScript. So a runtime is something that has some low-level commands in JavaScript to allow you to do certain things. So a great example of that would be the node fetch API, which we can see how that API looks here. So a typical node fetch API has all of these different properties classes. It is using beneath the hood some Go code in order to actually go and perform these HTTP requests. So if you're wanting to just use the fetch API, for instance, you need to forget being able to do that because it's not going to work the same way in Goja. So that's where a lot of the things we see in Extend with JavaScript um, uh, are going to break down because you're not able to use, for instance, a standard node package that you'd find in NPM because it just won't run. Like this node fetch, we'll look at the dependencies that this is required, data URI to buffer, fetch blob, form data polyfill. There is none of this in Goja and in the Pocketbase JavaScript runtime. So this is impossible, never going to work. So you have to use what Gunny is given, which is in the Pocketbase documentation, which is this http.send as part of your extensions. Now, the limitations for this is no support for streamed responses or for server-side events. So you couldn't do something like stream a server-side event to a Pocketbase extension. So these are the limitations of the JSVM, which is the JavaScript virtual machine, which you might hear in relation to Goja. The JavaScript virtual machine is the runtime that Go that the Goja engine is running on. But yeah, behind it is actually Go code, and all of these things are all hooked into the Go code in some way. Which is not a bad thing. It's just a limitation that you need to understand when you're building with Pocketbase. Now, for real-time messaging, we've got the ability to create topics and subscriptions. I've already gone into that in another video, which I'll link here. But essentially, it's where you'd handle your custom notifications, things like that. You've got file system, which allows you to upload and download files directly into your Pocketbase from the extensions. You've got logging, which might need to be a video of its own, but it's basically the way that we can interact with the Pocketbase logger to provide info on successful or failure or debug stuff that we're doing. And then we've got our type reference, which this is all of the underlying methods and functions that we have in Pocketbase. You'll find yourself entering here a fair bit if you're doing extensions because you'll be interacting a lot with these basic elements of Pocketbase. But let's jump in. I've had a few requests for creating a GeoJSON sort of extension. So I'm going to cover how to actually do that. But before we do that, I just want you to look at planet Earth real quick. And I just want you to see something. So I'm going to dismiss all of the flat earthers out there, and we're going to look at this sphere that we've got here. And this sphere is actually we can think of it as if we take the circumference of this sphere, right? And we take the radius, so the length of from the center of the Earth directly to the outer, this is how we're going to be able to calculate distances between points on planet Earth. And I will show you how this works. So distance between points. Let me find a good example of the way that this works. Yeah, so because you can't just draw a straight line between two places, you actually have to draw a curvature to get the best distance between 2 points. Because our planet is spherical, that's why we need to use the radius to the center of the Earth in order to calculate this curvature. So that's what we're going to be covering. It's going to be a little bit complicated and a little bit of math, but you know what? You guys are programmers, so I have faith that you're going to be able to accompany me on this journey. So we're going to do this in JavaScript, obviously, like I mentioned. But towards the end of the video, because I guess it's less desired, I'll just jump into how to extend with Go, and we can do something more simple. But for now, we'll just cover this particular extension, and I'll go into detail for how I've done this. So I want you to, if you haven't already, download Pocketbase, and I'm going to run you through the basics of what we need to do. So with this in mind, let's take a look at what we're going to be building. So we've got these geo coordinates that we've got up here for the lat and long. These are sort of close to the North Pole, I guess. And we're going to be building a flat Earth finder. So the way this works is we're going to have some users who are flat earthers, and we're going to locate how close these users are using their latitude and longitude. So we'll do that. I've set some coordinates here for these test users with latitude and longitude here. And when we run this API coordinate here with a radius of 100, we put in the user, which in this case is our user named Steve. And we'll see if we can get any flat earthers in a radius of 100 kilometers around. In this case, we've already got a user named Doug, who's 27 Ks from where Steve is. But if we were to create another user, for instance, who's way further away, like somewhere down in, let's say, maybe if we put them down in North America, we won't find them. But let's just test this hypothesis. James, and we'll put James at latitude 39 and longitude 5. And obviously I've added these 2 columns in, which feel free to do. I'm going to go into the code in a sec. Yeah, and if we rerun this query, pretty print, we'll notice that James is not in this query, but I bet if we expand this to, say, 5,000, it's not even 5,000 kilometers away. If we expand it to 10,000. Yeah, we can see that James is here, and he's just over 5,000 kilometers away. So let's jump into the code. So I've already coded up all of this, and I think for the sake of time and just to go through things, we'll just go through the code piece by piece rather than me piecemeal coding it for you guys. So first things first, I've created under the route these 2 variables here, which are really important. So I create this route variable on all of the routes that I extend in Pocketbase because it helps for adding into any sort of debugging queries that I put in later. So I haven't done it right here, but if you want to, we can just add in this route on the debug so that
when we log and we're doing any sort of testing for our extensions, we can just use this variable to denote where the debug log is coming from, so that we know that it's coming from this endpoint. The second variable that we've got here is the info, and the info variable in Pocketbase is very important for being able to pull any information off the request. So that's going to be able to get our parameters. Then when we're talking about parameters, we're talking about everything after these question mark here, which is where we're getting our data come through. So we've got this user parameter, our radius parameter, pages and per page parameter, which are coming directly onto our route. So when we call this here, we're actually populating this with data so that we can make the call. And then obviously using the logger, which is what I explained a little bit earlier, which is essential when building extensions, because all logs for this request will appear within our Pocketbase here. Now, these are only info logs, but if I went and changed the log setting to -4 here, and then we rerun this query, and then refresh. Hold on. It's -6. Yeah, there we go. Then we can see that our requests are coming through here. We can see that we're getting constructed logs. So I'll leave that as that for now. Now we get into the maths of things. So we've got this calculate distance function, and this is straight math. Already Pocketbase and Goja has this math library built into it, which we can use, and it should be like for like with the math library that we get in Node. So there's already the math in order to calculate the radians, which is the slice of the Earth's circumference, in order to calculate the exact distance of a very much spherical, a truly spherical planet, as is. And we have our lat long and long for both different coordinates inputted there. And then we've got our 2 radians, which is taking the Earth's circumference, and then the degrees, and then getting the radians out of that. And then we've got our bounding box, which is a box that we use to determine the max and min longitude that we should get. And this actually does the actual fetching of the users by the filter string. Because when we're in Pocketbase, the only thing that we can do is basically run these filter strings like so. So we have to create a bounding box in order to retrieve the coordinates, and that basically means that we only want to get latitude within a certain area, which we're calculating via this calculate bounding box, which takes the radians and does all the goodness that's needed in order to get these final coordinates, which we have in an array here coming out of it. Now, jumping into how the query actually works, first thing we do is we take this info object that we pull off the request info, and we get the query parameter of user, which is this user here, and that gives us our user ID, and we debug that user ID so that we know that we're fetching that. And if we go back to our logs here and we see the debug there, we can see that coming through. Quick note, I don't think I mentioned it. If you want to attach any sort of object or anything like that, the way to do that in Pocketbase extensions is to use this JSON parameter, and then you can log an actual object directly to it. without doing this on the logs, and like if you just put in anything you want, like test and then an object, that's going to throw an error in Pocketbase. So just something to note if you're doing your own testing or building out your own extension like this. And then you go if not user ID. So if we don't have this user ID, then we should throw a 400. We can test that we're getting a 400 here by removing this user. Oops. Just no member JSON. Oh, this is probably because we're getting the debugger logs. In any case, yeah, this throws a 400 if we don't have the user ID. We can use this user ID to do a lookup to get the user record, which has our latitude and longitude. And this is the only thing that we've done on the actual users is add this latitude and longitude. Otherwise, it's just the standard default users. And once we get that, we've got to actually retrieve the latitude and longitude for the users using this .getFloat method, which is we actually have to read the value into a specific JavaScript type, and that's what this getFloat does. And then we have the radius, which is also on our parameter, which we're passing as a float. We've got the page, which we're passing as an int, and the per page, which we're passing as an int. And these are fetched, of course, off of these query parameters here as well. Again, we've got our debugging here, which just shows that we've got all of these parameters come through. And if we go to our logs and we see receive request with parameters, these were the parameters that we were looking at when we got everything within the 10,000 radius of the user. And now we have to use have to make sure that if there's any errors within the lat or longitude that that we return a 400, and then we use our max lat and min lat. Then we use our lat, longitude, and radius to create the bounding box, which if we read in the lat, long, and radius of the user, and we calculate this in the bounding box, we have the radius, we get everything that is within that radius, and calculate these coordinates out of it. And that gives us our min lat, min long, max long. And then we use this filter string in order to get all of the records by this filter. Finally, we log the just have here. Again, we're using this data.json command in order to return this within Pocketbase. And we map out the nearest users using getFloat, and then we calculate the distance and we return the user and the distance as an actual parameter, so that when we look here, we've got this distance attached to our items, which are there, so that we can see how far away the user is. We don't have to add this distance on. We could just return the user itself. But I think it's cool to see how the actual distance is calculated. because yeah, if we input the Latin long and two different coordinates, again, we can use the original radius in order to find the distance between these two. And yeah, this is the Earth's radius in kilometers. I don't think this is exact, but this is close enough to be able to actually make the calculation, which is, yeah, more accurate because we've got, well, we know that um, the Earth isn't flat and that the points, you can't just draw a straight line, it's sort of curved in order to get the actual distance, which I think is pretty cool. And this is an awesome use of math. So, yeah, we get that calculating distance and we return that. By this stage, this is just manipulation of the data. This isn't getting, we've already got the records in the bounding box. And now we're just slicing up the records so that we get an index of the paginated records so that we can use those to display only a subset. Now, one thing to note performance-wise is this is getting all of the records and then slicing them up and serving them. So if you're dealing with thousands of records, this may cause problems on your database. So you'll need to optimize this function. Again, this is just for an example. So it's not particularly well thought out for performance, but yeah, that's something to note if you're building for a production grade application. I mean, you could still use this in production, but it's just about whether it's going to be good for you, like if you're depending on the amount of records you're dealing with. And then we construct the response based off of the parameters that we have here, which we construct to look like a normal Pocketbase return where you've got page per page, total items, pages, items. And then we put in our debug, showing that we've done the works. And we've got this one here with the message. That's another thing as well. You can add this data.message to add in an actual message on top of the debug log. Then we return our constructed response. And of course, we run all of this in a try catch because if there's any problems, we want to be able to return a 500 internal server. So yeah, this is a lot, but this is ultimately what makes Pocketbase so powerful. One of the things that I'll mention about Pocketbase extensions is that Pocketbase extensions only run directly on Pocketbase. And this might be a problem if you're doing some sort of distributed or global application, because you're going to have to figure out, well, how do I make all of these extensions able to be called with the lowest latency? Because you won't be able to call them with the lowest latency because they're located in one specific place. This differs from something like a Vercel edge function or a Cloudflare worker, where you're able to essentially call your functions as close to the user as possible, which means that theoretically your latency is much lower. So that's just one of the things to keep in mind. Now that we've found our flat Earth friends, I think that probably the best thing to do is to look at a final example of building with a main.go extension. So let's jump into that. So the last part of this video, I wanted to cover extending with Go. The best thing about extending with Go is that you get access to a lot more of the low-level functions. You also don't even have to use Pocketbase. You can use the Go libraries in order to be able to do your serving or routing or things like that. And this is what some have called building with Pocketbase as a framework. And this basically just means that you use Pocketbase for what Pocketbase is good at, which is doing your CRUD operations, and then you use Go for what Go is good at, which is doing sort of your low-level stuff with some guardrails in there to help you not screw up. So yeah, the thing I think that is interesting about building with and extending with Go is the fact that you can also modify the way that you use SQLite, so you can connect Pocketbase to external SQLite drivers, which is helpful for if you're wanting to sort of use Pocketbase as just an admin front end. You're not really too interested in building with um, maybe the extensions, and you want to see if you can do some horizontal scaling stuff. While this is not recommended for Pocketbase, you actually can do it with because Terso has solved the horizontal scaling problem for libsql, which is also in a way a fork of SQLite. So and this opens the door for so many things. Like you've got your vector databases, you've got a lot of things that you can do. But to get started, really, what you want to do is to copy this file here, and then you want to. I'm just going to create a new folder called Go Extensions, and I'm going to get out of this Pocketbase here. I'm going to Go Extensions. I'm just going to create a Go file under Go Extensions, and we're just going to paste this in here. And then once you've got that in there, you can go and run this command here, which goes through and finds all of the models that are required. And then we can run this go.run. Another equally cool thing about running Pocketbase with Go is that your ability to build for different environments is vastly improved. So you can compile to whatever you want. Like if you wanted to run Pocketbase on OpenWRT or any sort of device, you can do that using Go, because you can basically just compile to it. So while this is downloading, I'll just run through some of the differences. So I guess the big differences that that we have in Go is that we have access to a lot more of the library um, of the libraries that Go has, and we're not limited to Goja, which is the implementation um, of uh, of JavaScript in Go. Some things that you will definitely want to do is you definitely want to start your JSVM if you're going to be doing Pocketbase Go extensions. So in the case of the library I built for Stripe, I basically bootstrapped it with the JSVM command. So Pocketbase Stripe. So this one here, if you go into the main.go file for this, I run it with this JSVM hook here, which is essential to be actually able to get the JSVM running. So just something to note, you must put this in here and if you want to run the JSVM on top. And we can just save this and we can do the run that we wanted to up here. We can serve this up. I have to run the tidy again. Go mod tidy. Let's see if this behaves. Looks like it's behaved. We can run this now. And we're cooking with gas. So yeah, this is how to extend with Go. I doubt you're going to be doing it too much. if you are doing it, you just need to be careful that um, you're not messing with any of the internals of Pocketbase. Pocketbase, in this sense, is very much a batteries not included sort of framework, because you're not going to be able to, if you run into any complications, you're not really going to be in the world of Pocketbase. You're going to be in the world of Go, and I doubt that you'll get any support from Garni, the maintainer of Pocketbase. He'll just say, well, you're doing your own thing. So that's why I like building with JavaScript. And I'm curious to know what you guys are building, what you are using, whether you're using Go or you're using JavaScript. I hope this video was helpful for building your own extensions, and I can't wait to see what you guys are going to build with your extensions. Um, if you have found this useful in any way, I recommend that you check out my newsletter. That's where I'm talking about the latest news for the week. I'm talking about a tool that's going to help you do productive work as a developer. And I also talk about just tutorials I think that are really, really helpful and have expanded my knowledge, and hopefully they can expand yours. Furthermore, if you're interested in building in Pocketbase, I recommend that you check out FastPocket. It's my template for building apps in Pocketbase. I think it's hugely helpful for developers who just want to get a front end. It's Next.js, so if that's at all of interest to you, if you don't want to go through the headache of doing server-side rendering with Pocketbase, because I've already done it for you, check that one out and let me know what you think. I'll see you guys next week in the next video. See ya.